Awesome, awesome. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Eagle Productions Respect. We have it. We have wonderful equipment that we've been blessed with, and we're so excited that from here on out, every episode is going to look so professional, and we're grateful for this. We're going to do a deep dive on the big, beautiful bill. That's right. It's been all over the news, and President Trump signed into law on July 4th, 2025. The bill is called H.R. Big Beautiful Bill Act. H.R. 1 is the House of Representatives. That's where it originated in the House of Congress. And the 1 is just a number it kept through. And there was 5 different kind of debates as was going on. First, it had to get through the committee, the Budget Committee. Then it had to get through the House of Representatives. Then the Senate had some debates on it. Then went back to the House, and then it was signed into law by President Trump. Now, what is this big, beautiful bill? What it is called a Budget Reconciliation Act. Now, a budget reconciliation is a way for Congress to pass legislation in a way that checks the executive power and avoids what's called a Senate filibuster. In 1974, President Nixon was really under pressure with the Watergate scandal, and Congress is trying to check his power, and so they passed the 1974 Budget Act. Now, I want to give a citation to CBS News, particularly Major Garrett, on May 16, 2025. He and CBS News published an account where I'm getting this source from. In 1974, Congress passed this Budget Act. July 12th of 1974, President Nixon signed it into law. And this act does a few things. First, it creates both budget committees in the United States House of Representatives and the United States Senate. It also enacts the Congressional Budget Office, which is a panel of economists and analysts that analyze different tax reforms and different bills that go through Congress. And it also established what's called reconciliation. And what that is that typically from the U.S. Constitution, you need 60 votes in the Senate to pass legislation. Now, with this reconciliation, you can circumvent that. See, before, when something's getting passed in the Senate, they have what's called a filibuster, which is a way to prohibit or even stop outright legislation getting through. And a simple majority is only needed because you need 60 votes to call it a cloture on the Senate, on a Senate filibuster. For example, if a bill is going through the Senate and there's a bill that, say, about 48 or so senators don't like, there are very limited rules, and the citation from this is from the government website of the United States Senate. There's very little rules regarding the debate for senators, meaning it's kind of like the Wild West. A lot can go. And also, if there's a bill that, say, 48 senators aren't in favor of, when this open to debate, that means that one senator can stand up and just talk incessantly. The record is by Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey, who earlier this year, opposing President Trump's policies, he spoke for 25 hours straight, in fact, over 25 hours straight. And that is the record. And he was attempting to stop President Trump with his policies. And what the Senate can do is that when a bill is coming through the Senate and when it's on the floor for debate, a senator can stand up and just talk indefinitely to delay a vote. And that could put pressure on the other party to put in different amendments or different parts of the bill to get what that senator or senators want. Now, the Budget Reconciliation Act goes against that. When a Budget Reconciliation Act is going through, only a simple majority is needed to pass legislation. So in this case, the Democrats were in disagreement with this bill. And so they couldn't have a filibuster in the Senate to stop or delay it because there's a reconciliation, and only 50 plus 1, the Vice President of the United States, because the U.S. Constitution says when there's a tie, the Vice President is able to cast a tie-breaking vote. They're able to get this bill passed. Now this bill is broken up into 10 titles, kind of like book chapters. And these 10 titles are Title I, Committee on Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry. Title II, Committee on Armed Services. Title III, Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs. Title IV, Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation. Title V, Committee on Energy and Natural Resources. Title VI, Committee on Environment and Public Works. Title VII, Finance. Title VIII, Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. Title IX, Committee on Homeland Security and Government Affairs. And Title X, Committee on Judiciary. And this bill has a lot of different parts to it. It's over 1,000 pages long. It starts out in Title I, a Committee on Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry. There's a subtitle with nutrition. Now, there's a difference here where to qualify for government food, to have your necessities met through the government, particularly in regards to food, there's a requirement, a work requirement, where you have to work 80 hours per month, the equivalent of a part-time job. If you don't work that minimum amount, then you won't qualify for this government program. Now, there's an exception. If you are medically found to be physically or mentally unfit for work, you can get an exception and circumvent that rule. So this both takes care of the poor and needy as long as they're trying to get work, and also if for physical or mental instability, as a competent doctor finds, they can circumvent this and still get their necessities taken care of. The Committee on Armed Services, in this part, there is vital funding given to the United States Coast Guard, particularly to building cutters and ships, and also to allow the United States military to expound their force and their presence in the Antarctic. And credit to Senator Ted Cruz from Texas, he claims that China is doing great work and taking over Antarctica and doing bases and military operations there. And this bill is going to help the United States to get in line with China and help us compete in that sphere. This is also where a lot of spending is. President Trump is very much in favor of government spending. So we find under Title II a lot of spending for the military and different training programs, different barracks, different educational opportunities, and also to help military families. And the Congressional Budget Office has scored this bill, according to CBS News, to increase the national debt by $3.4 trillion. There's also Committee on Banking, Housing, Urban Affairs. It does away with a lot of different programs that President Biden was trying to promulgate and get through. Also, in the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, President Biden had what's called a Green New Deal, and Democrats in Congress were also in favor of this. This was an opportunity to try and have more environmental friendly energy programs. They put different sanctions on oil and gas and coal. They also tried, for example, heavy equipment and trucks, trying to have cleaner. There's incentives to try and have cleaner and more efficient working of those vehicles. And in this bill, it does away with a lot of those. And so a lot of those restrictions that President Biden signed into law in 2022, they've been abrogated and done away with right now in 2025. There's also another part of this bill. It is no tax on tips and no tax on overtime. Now, there are some exceptions. For example, up to a certain amount, $25,000 if I remember the number correctly from the bill, up to that point, there's no tax, and then taxes start kicking in there. On overtime, it's for couples that make $300,000 or less than or equal to $300,000 for couples, or single individuals, $150,000 equal to or less than that, then they're able to qualify for this. If you're above that, then you don't qualify for it. But if you're in that sphere, you don't need it. And so that is a campaign promise President Trump kept. And he was in Las Vegas, Nevada, and he literally wrote on a napkin, no tax on chips. And he did this during the campaign when he was facing then Vice President Kamala Harris. And this is an example of a politician keeping their promise. And that doesn't always happen. And I commend President Trump for doing that. Also, there's another blessing as part of this as well. In the United States Congress, there's a committee called the Joint Committee on Taxation. And this is a nonpartisan congressional committee in the U.S. Congress composed of members of Congress from the Senate Committee on Finance and also the House Committee on Ways and Means. And that's different rules and different fundings as well in Congress. And I also credit Senator Ted Cruz for this citation, and also from the Joint Committee on Taxation for this citation as well. They scored it that people making less than $15,000 a year, they're going to have a 16.4% cut on their taxes from this bill. People making between $15,000 and $30,000 will have a 27.1% cut in taxes from this bill. People making $30,000 to $40,000 will have a 9.5% cut, and people making $40,000 to $50,000 will have a 7.2% cut. So yes, the spending does go up $3.4 trillion. And I condemn the Trump administration for doing that. I'm not in agreement with that. However, I do commend them for having this tax cut on low-income individuals and no tax on tips and no tax on overtime is a tremendous blessing for low-income individuals. And in that case, I really do commend the president, one, for keeping his word, and two, for looking out for lower-income individuals. Also, what this bill does is that perpetuates the 2017 tax cuts that President Trump signed into law during his first term, and they're set to expire in 2025. And this budget reconciliation bill makes them permanent. According to Senator Cruz, there's going to be a $4 trillion increase in taxes if nothing was done. And since this was done, that means that taxes are going to be reduced and there's not going to be a $4 trillion increase in taxes. There's another blessing with this bill, and that's in regards to spectrum. And again, I give citation to Senator Cruz for this. There is called electromagnetic spectrum. And the United States has 60% of megaband, and every electronic device operates on that electromagnetic spectrum. And I have to give credit to my dear friend Thomas Sedgwicks for this. He helped me learn this. I did not come up with this or understand it myself. And what this does is that every time someone uses their cell phone or a laptop, they're using there's a finite amount of bandwidth, and they're using part of that bandwidth. And it's all in electromagnetic spectrum. And with the government owning 60% of it, this bill has a government sell 800 megahertz of that. And what Senator Cruz predicts is that that's going to bring $100 billion back to the United States, because what the federal government is going to do is auction it off so the private sector can buy it. Now, I didn't see in this bill a sanction or a regulation banning enemies towards the United States, such as Iran, North Korea, or China, from buying it. So one of my personal concerns with it, I didn't see it in the bill, but I haven't finished the whole bill yet. I will soon. But from what I've read, there isn't a sanction on that or regulation on it. So my concern with this is that when the federal government auctions off, what if China buys it? And they could use that against us. Now, if a pro-United States government buys it, that's great. But bottom line is the United States government will make hundreds of billions of dollars off this, according to Senator, $100 billion off this, according to Senator Cruz. And also that's going to create new jobs and new businesses, which is going to be a great asset to the United States economy. Also, there's also freedom of school choice, so children aren't going to be stuck in whatever school district they're in for public school. So that's an opportunity for children that this bill allows. And this bill also helps in terms of helping the United States people see concerns of spending. One of my concerns that I learned through reading this bill is that it allows, for example, for rural communities and residential communities that President Trump is going to invest in, and this bill has a section on that. It has billions of dollars here, millions of dollars here, and it states what that funding's for, but it doesn't say a specific plan for the funding. So it says we're going to invest $1 billion for urban housing development, for example. And I'm not directly quoting, that's just a hypothetical off the top of my head. But there's language like this in the bill. And it gives that money to that for that purpose, but there's no stated specific plan. And that is one thing I condemn about this bill, is that by just giving the goal of it without a specific plan, to me, that means this bill is susceptible to waste. And with $3.4 trillion of our national debt being exacerbated through this bill, we need to have specifics. How is this going to help our country? Yeah, urban housing development or whatever, residential communities or whatever the initiative is in the bill, how is it actually going to be spent? Don't just give out the money. Demand, we need a specific plan before the money is spent. There is one part, though, in all fairness, that is accurate about this bill. That is not just accurate, that's really good about this bill. Under Title II with the armed services, there's an astronomical amount of spending for the military, and I agree with that. That's wonderful. We need to have a strong military, and I'm so grateful for our military veterans, including my brother Ethan Hershey, serving the United States Coast Guard, and our family supporting him. We need to support our military veterans, our service members. We also need to have a strong military because China, as a government, they're evil. Iran, as a government, they're evil. They have potential to become celestial individuals, but they don't have the United States' interest at heart, and they don't have individual liberty and freedom at heart. They're in favor of communism and having exorbitant taxes on people, so their citizens don't get to spend the money they want. The government gets to take their money and spend it the way they want. These are not good countries, and they wouldn't want to hurt us. Not everyone loves us in the United States, outside the United States. So we need a strong military to defend ourselves and have, as President Ronald Reagan said, quote, peace through strength, close quote. So I'm in favor of the spending for the United States military. However, I'm concerned with the lack of specifics, whatever that word is. And a part of that, right before it goes to the next title, there's a direct quote from the bill. Quote, spending plan dash. Not later than 30 days after the date of the enactment of this title, the Secretary of each military department shall submit to the Committee on Armed Services of the Senate and House of Representatives a detailed spending plan by project for all funds made available for this title to be expended on military construction projects, close quote. In other words, it's a receipt, meaning, yes, the Congress does not mandate that the secretaries have to have a specific plan, and I would prefer if they had a specific plan before the money is allocated. That way we can see as people, we the people, and people in authority, they can say, earn it. You want this money, earn it. Now, they don't have that, and I condemn that. But I do commend this part. They're going to come back for receipts, at least in this part of the bill. So the Secretary of Navy, Secretary of the Army, the Commandant of the Marine Corps, all these heads of the military and secretaries, they're the Secretary of the Navy. He's not a member of the military. It's separate from the top admiral of the military. And so the secretaries, so different Secretary of the Army, Secretary of the Navy, for example, these are civilians serving in government. Before they spend, after they spend, they have to report to both the United States Senate and the House of Representatives a detailed report of their spending. So if they spend it on superfluous things, they're going to be held accountable. And so that's at least a positive. So I do commend President Trump and members of Congress who voted for this. That is a positive thing, and I agree with that. One thing I do condemn about this is that, in my opinion, in an upcoming episode on Eagle Productions Respect, we're going to go into why the United States needs to have nuclear weapon defense systems. If we can absolutely protect against nuclear weapons, the Russian invasion of Ukraine would be over. We have to be very careful. One, we don't want to get involved in foreign wars. War is a horrible thing. But secondly, if we get involved with Russia or Ukraine, Russia's already threatened, and there's been reports of Russia using different nuclear weapons in small capacities in this invasion so far. And I could be wrong. If I remember right, those were reports of. I'll verify back on subsequent episodes. But if I remember the reporting correctly, Russia is using small amounts of nuclear and chemical warfare. But I could be wrong. So I need to get back on that. And I take full responsibility and apologize for not having that fact more nailed down. However, though, they do have nuclear weapons. And if we got involved to push Russia out of Ukraine, that is a concern. Mutual assured destruction. At the same time, if we don't do anything, this could be a repeat of the 20th century World War II, where Adolf Hitler, he first invaded Poland, and then he went to the Rhineland in France, and the Neville Chamberlain got involved, and he said, okay, you can stay in the Rhineland, just don't go any further. Well, then continental Europe was basically all taken over by Nazi Germany come 1941. And we cannot let that happen. And President Putin, president of Russia, he said that the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century was the collapse of the Soviet Union, close quote. He was also a former KGB officer, which is the military police of the Soviet Union, on the Western Front and in East Germany. And that's where the majority of people trying to flee the Soviet Union was coming out, was trying to get out of the western border of the Soviet Union. And this is an inference, I could be wrong, but my inference is they put the meanest and baddest, and not in a good way, baddest KGB officers there, and that's where President Putin was, which indicates he's potentially not a good person. Now, that is an inference, so that's not a factual statement. However, that statement that he said about the Soviet Union, that is extremely concerning, meaning he has his eyes on rebuilding the Soviet Union, taking from that statement. And his justification for invading Ukraine is false, and I have to credit Dr. Julie Alt, a history professor at the University of Utah. Ukraine was established before Russia was ever around. And to say that Ukraine took land from Russia, that's not accurate in the sense that Ukraine existed before Russia. And if so many Ukrainian citizens wanted to be part of Russia, why are they fighting back vociferously? And a concern I have with this bill is that I haven't read the full bill, so that's one weakness here, and I take full responsibility for that. I didn't see any funding for nuclear weapon defense. Now, there are to augment our nuclear weapon capacities, and I do support that and commend President Trump for that. But there isn't anything that I read of addressing nuclear weapon defense because we're in a new world, and that's our adaptation as a nation. We need to have that. We cannot live in a world where countries with nuclear weapon capabilities control and do what they want, break international law. And a way to stop that is to have nuclear weapon defense. This is the big, beautiful act. The positives is that it reduces taxes and does wonderful things with the military. And there's another part of this too, it's called Trump accounts. So every newborn child, the federal government is going to put into a investment, kind of like a 401k, a private account that the parents can't take out. Parents can, and other people close to that child can invest in it, but they can't take it away. It's the child's money. The federal government gives each of those child, so a child born next year will get $1,000 from the government put in. And then it's in a broad-based equity account called an S&P 500. And I have to cite Senator Ted Cruz for this source. I did not come up with this. And the S&P 500 has a historical growth of 7%. And when parents employers, or anyone that cares about that child puts on average $5,000 every year after that, by the time that child turns 18, they're projected to have over $100,000 in that account. By the time that child turns 35, if that rate of $5,000 every year keeps going, perpetuates, that child will have over $700,000 in that account. And this will be an opportunity for the younger generation to see the beauties of capitalism, that we don't want government running everything, because the more taxes, and I have to credit President Reagan for this, just like the law of gravity and the laws of nature, they're laws, whether humans like them or not. There's another law of nature that governments are only funded through taxes. And the people who pay those taxes are the citizens of that in the bounds of that government. And the only way that government gets fueled is through those taxes. And the more taxes that individual has, and here's the law, the less freedom that person has. If you make $100 for your income and the government takes 15%, that's 15% of the money you don't have the freedom to decide what you want to do with. Instead, government takes it and spends it the way they want. The bigger the government, the more the taxes, the more powerful the government, the less freedom we the people have. We need to have more freedom. Government should not take our money and say, we're going to spend it the way we want. We need to keep our money because we earn it. And by God's grace, we have the freedom to say, we're going to spend it here or wherever we want to. As long as it doesn't infringe on the rights of anyone else, we get to do it. And this reduces taxes. And that is a positive thing. And that's also the beauties of capitalism, free market, where we don't have people like the mayor the candidate who won the Democratic primary in New York, Mandami. He wants the government to run grocery stores in New York City and other things. Effectively, he appears to me to be a communist. He wants complete government control. And the way government gets control, they get more power, they get more taxes from the people, and that means people have less freedom. And that is not right. We need freedom. I trust you to spend the money that you earn. Government shouldn't be telling you what to do. You need to earn your money. Or you need to spend the money you earn. And I do too. And so this is going to allow this next generation to see the beauties of that, of incremental and positive growth, and having investments in all sorts of companies and seeing the beauties of capitalism. That's a positive. The reducing the taxes are positives. The helping the military, those are positives. The negatives, according to the Congressional Budget Office, are the $3.4 trillion in debt, and it's going to exacerbate the debt, and also not addressing nuclear weapon defense. I disagree with that. And not having more specificities. I guess I said that word finally, right? Not having specifics on how the government, on the funding that government's giving to these different entities, whether it's residential buildup or even different parts of the military. To me, that's not right. If you're going to get money from the government, you need to have a specific plan where you're going to use that for. So all in all, in my opinion, this is a good bill. I agree with it. It's wonderful reducing taxes. The work requirements for supplemental nutrition, those are positive. Also, the Congressional Budget Office also says that 10 million people lose their health care with the requirements and the differences in Medicaid, which is after you turn 65, individuals qualify for government-assisted health care. And there's other exceptions too, like, for example, like disabilities, physically, mentally unfit, or for example, the government, military, someone has a horrible injury, they can qualify for different governmental insurances. But generally speaking, Medicaid's for when you turn a certain age and you qualify for that. According to the Congressional Budget Office, about 10 million people lose that from the differences. Now, another positive is that there's a cut of taxes from seniors receiving Social Security benefits. So that is a positive. It's a little bit concerning, people losing Medicaid, but there is some abuse. And this bill also is attempting to do what the governmental efficiency, DOGE, that Elon Musk formerly ran. They're going in to make sure there's not fraud, waste, and abuse. There's different parts of the bill that address that. But it is concerning. I hope those 10 million people, I hope they can get health insurance in other places. I hope there's no fraud and abuse, but some of them, it appears that there are. And the spending, that is concerning. But the positives, reducing taxes is wonderful. Helping the military is wonderful. These Trump accounts, those are wonderful. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime. President Trump keeping his word, those are positives. People, thank you so much for tuning in. This is an Eagle Production Respect episode with wonderful equipment. There's people I want to thank. I want to thank Thomas Sudwicks. He worked so much behind the scenes here. He set up all these cameras and all these lights. He's let me borrow a $600 camera. He's let me borrow it for free. He's a great friend. I'm honored to be his friend. Tristan Timothy. He has an exam coming up in less than a week. And since I don't have a BYU employee card yet, I need to borrow my friend's student card. Tristan, while he's studying for an exam, he came over and he let me borrow his student card and he let me get all this equipment and help set up. He's wonderful. I want to thank Brigham Young University for letting a University of Utah graduate borrow this wonderful equipment. I'm going to be honest, I love Brigham Young University. I really do. I love Utah, but Brigham Young, you earned my love. Thank you to Brigham Young University. I also want to thank Don Chewy's. This is a wonderful Mexican restaurant. They're our sponsor to EPR. The owner of this business, Hugo Escovel, he's an honest, ethical, and hardworking man, and he's a good man. You can find him at donchewy's.com. If you want an authentic Mexican meal for you or your family, or to bring in a lunch for your business or your wedding or whatever you have going on, this is the place for you. I have eaten countless times at this place. It is so good. The food is fresh and good, and the people are amazing. All the workers are very good, honest, ethical people. Find them at donchewy's.com. They're also located at 520 North, 900 East Provo, Utah, 84606. That's 520 North, 900 East Provo, Utah, 84606. And their phone number is 801-375-2587. Also want to thank XD Cars. They're located at 1499 North State Street, Provo, Utah, 84606. 1499 North State Street, Provo, Utah, 84606. If you or your family or anyone you know is looking to buy or sell a car, this is the place for you. Go find them online at xdcars.com, 801-919-9290, 801-919-9290. I have bought a car from them. They've helped me buy other cars. They are honest, ethical people. Also, if you speak Spanish, they have so many people who are fluent Spanish speakers. So if you or anyone you know, whether you speak English or Spanish or a different language, they can help you, and they're an honest business, and they will help you to the best of their ability. Also, I want to thank Michael Gunnell. He has spent a donation for this podcast. If you or anyone you know is looking for real estate in Europe, particularly England or in India, he's the man for you. He has an ethical company, he's competent, and he will help you. Brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, everyone who cares about the United States of America, thank you so much for tuning in. This was so much fun, and get ready for future episodes. We got the equipment, we got the passion, we got the love. This is just the beginning of this wonderful podcast and this opportunity to bring respect back. Well, honestly, respect hasn't been in the United States for a long time. Not so I bring it back. We're establishing respect. We want political peacemakers. No matter what you believe, when you watch this podcast, our goal is for you to feel respected, no matter if you agree with us or not. And ladies and gentlemen, we're going to do this. There's hope in the United States. We're going to address these important issues. There's over $30 trillion in debt. We can't be sitting around for this. And we also can't be lambasting people who disagree with us. Thank you for tuning in. Get ready for future episodes because we've just begun and we're just getting started. Thank you.